Hello everyone, my name is Miriam Romagosa and I would first like to thank SPECO for awarding me with the second prize of the PhD award in ecology. And also I'd like to thank Civical for letting me present remotely this PhD thesis. Now, let me walk you through this presentation. I'll start with a brief introduction and then follow with the acoustic presence and behavior of baleen whales in Chapter 2, then fin whale call function in Chapter 3, fin whale song evolution in Chapter 4, and ambient and shipping noise in Chapter 5, to then finish up with the main conclusions. In this thesis, we focused on 3 species of baleen whales, the blue, the fin, and the sei whale. These species are found in all oceans, and most populations undertake long seasonal migrations from high latitude feeding grounds to low latitudes used for breeding. Yet, we know very little about the behavior of these whales during migration or in winter, although it's an important part of their life cycle. These animals are mainly solitary, but can form small temperate and stable groups, and they produce some of the loudest and lower frequency sounds in the animal kingdom that are especially suited for long-range communication, and are believed to help whales find and communicate with mates and conspecifics in the vast ocean. These sounds can be produced irregularly as calls that can have multiple functions, but these calls can be organized in a regular and stereotyped way, forming songs. Songs are believed to act as reproductive displays because they are only produced by males, and singing occurs mainly during the non-breeding season. But not only whales make sounds in the ocean. Most human activities produce noise that can have a negative impact on the marine environment. The effects of ocean noise in marine mammals can be acute, like mortality, injury, or shifts in hearing thresholds, or moderate, like physiological stress, behavioral disturbance, and masking. Sources of ocean noise are varied and include, among others, seismic surveys, installation of wind farms, military sonar, and shipping. Shipping noise is the most important source of anthropogenic noise below 1 kHz and is responsible for the increasing levels of ocean noise. Fin, blue, and sei whale calls and potential hearing overlap in frequency with shipping noise, which can cause behavioral disturbance and reduce their communication space, potentially affecting their ability to communicate with conspecifics, find mates, and breed successfully. The Azores archipelago is a migratory habitat in the North Atlantic for blue, fin, and sei whales. In spring, blue and fin whales stop to feed in the archipelago on their way to northern latitudes, timing their arrival with the bloom in primary productivity, while sei whales transit through the islands with only occasional feeding. Hence, the Azores is an excellent spot to investigate the vocal behavior of these 3 species during migration and to learn about this phase of their life cycles. So, the objectives of this thesis were, first, to investigate the vocal behavior of fin, blue, and sei whales with a special focus on the fin whale to infer into their ecology and behavior during migration. And secondly, to measure ambient and shipping noise levels and discuss potential implications to baleen whale migratory behavior. In Chapter 2, we investigated the acoustic presence and behavior of these 3 species in the Azores. And to do that, we collected the acoustic recordings by deploying ears at 3 seamounts, Condor, Gigante, and Azores, that sampled from 2008 to 2012. In these recordings, calls of each species were detected and counted. Results showed that fin and blue whales had a similar seasonal pattern in all locations, with calling rates increasing in autumn, peaking in winter, decreasing in spring, with no calling in the summer. Sei whales showed a different pattern, with call rates peaking in spring and autumn in all locations. Also, rates of the 2 fin whale call types increased in autumn, peaking winter, and decreased in spring. Blue whale A call had a similar seasonal pattern, but AB calls were only found in winter. Blue whale D calls were detected at similar rates from autumn through spring, which may be explained by the multifunctionality of this call. To discuss these results briefly, we can say that fin and blue whales were acoustically present in the Azores archipelago all seasons except summer, and were engaged in reproductive behaviors in autumn, winter, and early spring, as suggested by their singing activity. In late spring, fin and blue whales change their calling behavior, decreasing singing rates and switching call types, which suggests a change of behaviors from reproduction to foraging. Sei whale calling activity was bimodal, with maximums in spring and autumn, which agrees with their presumed migration patterns. In Chapter 3, we focused in the fin whale and investigated the function of two of their calls. We did that by first setting three hypotheses. 1. If fin whale songs act as acoustic displays, then we expect the call production will be driven just by season. 2. If songs also advertise food resources, as suggested by some authors, then singing activity would be influenced by season and prey. Finally, if the 40th call is associated to a feeding behavior, as suggested by other studies, then calling rates will be related to prey. But we did not have measurements for prey biomass for the long period of recordings, so we used an ecosystem model called Cpodim LTL that provided HINCA simulations of mesozooplankton, the main prey of fin whales in our study area. Zooplankton biomass was extracted weekly for the position of the hydrophones in 2 locations of the Azores. Call rates of each call type were calculated as the number of calls per week divided by the recording time of that week. And then we did generalized linear models to understand the relationship between call rates and zooplankton biomass, season, and year. So, what did the models tell us? For the 20th call, season was the most important predictor of calling activity, followed by year. Zooplankton biomass had no significant effect on the 20th call. The call rate was significantly higher in winter than in autumn and spring, and 2012 had significantly lower call rates than all other years except from 2009. The best model for the 40th call rate included only zooplankton biomass, and call rate increased with increasing zooplankton biomass. Going back to our hypothesis, our results suggest that, at least in our study area, fin whales do not attract females by signaling prey. For the 40th call, our study confirms the food-related function of this call by associating it, for the first time, to zooplankton biomass. And now, let's discuss a little bit the function of the 40th call based on studies from other taxa. Food-associated calls provide information about a food source or feeding event. Fin whales may use the 40th calls to attract conspecifics to a feeding site to increase their foraging efficiency, for example by tracking prey movements. Food-associated calls could also be used to reduce or mediate competitive interactions over food by establishing resource ownership and/or regulate spacing between foragers. At present, though, we do not know the ultimate function of the 40th fin whale call when produced in feeding contexts. Now let's move to Chapter 4, where we investigated how fin whale songs varied over 2 decades. And to do so, we open up our study area to a wider area in the North Atlantic. We collected acoustic recordings by several colleagues from the entire Central and Eastern Atlantic. The longest dataset corresponds to this offshore area called the Oceanic Northeast Atlantic, or ONA for short, that have data from 1999 to 2020. We analyzed all these recordings by measuring the peak frequencies of the 20th and higher frequency notes that constitute fin whale songs. And we also analyzed the internote interval, or INI for short, which is the time interval between 2 consecutive 20th notes. So, we first reported a rapid change of song types from 19 to 12 seconds, INIs, in just 4 singing seasons in the southeast locations of the ONA region. We also found hybrid songs that included both INI types during the transition period. In the singing season of 2002-03, we report a geographic pattern in song types, with a 19-second INI song largely dominating in the southwest and decreasing progressively to the east, where the 12-second INI song became prominent. Hybrid songs were more abundant at central and easternmost locations. After this rapid change, from 2007 to 2020, we found a gradual increase of INIs from about 12 to 16 seconds. All sample locations fitted the trend, except from an isolated account in the Greenland Sea and songs from the Barents Seas and Iberian coast regions that showed different INIs. Also, we found a gradual decrease in frequencies of both call types, with much lower decreasing rate for the 20th call than for the higher frequency call. And what is the meaning of these findings? Well, first, the existence of hybrid songs found in these and other studies suggests that fin whale vocal plasticity is greater than previously thought. This vocal plasticity, together with the geographic pattern in song types and extreme conformity, all suggest that fin whales may be able of social learning. Thus, the rapid changes in song types in just 4 singing seasons resemble the cultural revolutions described for humpback whale songs. In this next chapter, we analyzed underwater noise levels in the Azores and discussed potential implications for whales. The same dataset that in Chapter 2 was used here in this study. Underwater noise levels were measured in sound pressure levels by using a MATLAB-based code called PalmGuide that uses specifications of the hydrophone to obtain calibrated measurements. SPLs were calculated for the frequency band of 18 to 1000 Hz and for 2 1/3 octave bands, the 63 and the 125 Hz. We also identified local intermittent ship noise by applying an adaptive threshold or ATL to the broadband ambient noise levels. Then, time with noise levels above this threshold was summed and divided by the total recording time to obtain the percentage of time with ship noise, or PTATL. To explain the spatial and temporal variability in noise levels and ship noise, I will use these graphs. They have a lot of information, but I just want to transmit 3 main messages. First, Kondo have the higher average and median noise levels, followed by Gigante, and lastly, Azores. Second, in Kondo and Gigante, time with ship noise peak in the summer and early autumn in some years, and in Azores, ship noise peaked in late spring and early summer. Third, these maximums in time with ship noise increase broadband and 1/3 octave band noise levels in all sea months except Gigante, where time with ship noise is generally high throughout the year. We also computed time with noise levels of over 120 dBs, because baleen whales have shown behavioral responses to ship noise exceeding this value. The higher time with noise levels above 120 dBs was of 3.3%. Then, we looked at the contribution of a natural source, wind, versus an anthropogenic source, shipping. Average contribution of wind noise to background noise levels was of approximately 10 dBs, slightly differing between locations, while ship noise increased background noise levels in around 20 dBs. So, in these 3 locations, noise levels were low compared to some areas of the Mediterranean Sea, and time with ship noise was relatively low, as it was the time with noise levels above 120 dB. However, these results are not representative for all locations of the Azores. Other areas like, for example, the Fayal-Pico Channel are much noisier and have higher PTATLs. Also, the contribution of boat noise to background noise levels are much higher, doubling that of wind-driven noise. And finally, our noise measurements may be underestimated due to the low sensitivity of ears and low frequencies that affect broadband average noise levels and thus the calculation of time with noise levels above 120 dBs. Therefore, we cannot rule out the possibility that ship noise is causing masking on vocalizations of bluefin and sei whales while migrating through the Azores. The higher presence of time with ship noise overlaps with the presence of 3 species in spring in Azores and all year round in Gigante except summer. These areas are used by fin and blue whales for foraging and migrating, and for sei whales for migrating. So, masking or vocalizations associated to feeding could reduce foraging efficiency, and masking of social calls may affect the ability of whales to maintain contact with each other, while we still don't understand if this can have an impact on the ability of animals to complete their migratory journeys. Finally, let's move to the general discussion. This was the first study on bilingual vocal behavior in a mid-latitude migratory habitat in the North Atlantic. Fin and blue whales sing in autumn, winter, and early spring, and change their calling behavior in late spring. Sei whales maintain acoustic contact with conspecifics while migrating. Fin whale songs are not used for signaling food resources, at least in our study area. Fin whale 40F calls are positively associated to prey biomass. There is one unique acoustic population of fin whales in the central and northeast Atlantic. Fin whale songs change, evolve, and are culturally transmitted. And we provided the first measurements of ambient and shipping noise in an offshore area of the Azores archipelago, but more measurements are needed in areas with higher shipping traffic. And to finish, let's briefly go through the management implications of the main findings. Recognizing the Azores as a migratory and wintering habitat for the 3 species of baleen whales. Understanding acoustic behavior and call function and evolution in a mid-Atlantic region, and measuring shipping noise and sound propagation modeling have contributed to the identification of migratory routes, functional habitats, and soundscape maps that are necessary to predict human impacts and support conservation planning. Thanks very much for your attention, and I would like to thank the funders of this study, the Fundação Regional de Ciência e Tecnologia for my doctoral grant, my host institutions, and to my supervisors, work colleagues, and friends for their great support.